Creature Commandos cast, who's who in Episode 5, from Clayface to Liu Kang and Scorpion? Creature Commandos is heating things up in a big way with Episode 5, The Iron Pot. Not only do we get Eric Frankenstein's backstory, but we also get the introduction of a major Batman villain, and 2 Mortal Kombat characters. Seriously. So who's who in the Creature Commandos Episode 5 voice cast? Before we get to that, here's a recap of what went down, and spoilers past this point. Surprisingly, we open up on Professor Isla McPherson teaching a class on Themyscira, and inappropriately hitting on a character called Buxom Student. Meanwhile, Rick Flag Sr. and Eric Frankenstein do a piss-poor job of spying on her, outside the classroom. Realizing she's acting weird, she says the best part of the all-female island is lesbians, which she writes in huge letters on the board. They head to her house to scope things out. Frankenstein is very focused on Rick helping him get in good with the bride. Rick merely wants to save Princess Ilana by proving Circe's vision of her causing the world's discussion was faked, for unknown reasons. In the process, Frankenstein becomes very suspicious of all the cats being walking on leashes in the neighborhood. But the bigger problem is that the professor is dead, her throat slit. Rick calls and warns Ilana, and more on that in a second. It turns out that McPherson has been replaced by a shape-changer. Specifically Clayface, the classic Batman villain, who sits down to play a game of Mortal Kombat on the Xbox. And then proceeds to beat Rick and Frankenstein senseless. In fact, after pulling a bane-breaking Batman's back maneuver on Rick, it looks like he's dead by the end of the episode. Frankenstein manages to beat Clayface by electrocuting him, but is it too late for Rick? Given he's popping up on Peacemaker Season 2 and in Superman? Probably not. Regardless, over in Pokalistan, the Creature Commandos led by the bride have their own problems. Alexei is onto them after Rick calls Ilana, and tries to get them to stand down. Instead, Dr. Phosphorus stands up and kills Alexei. What follows is a pitched battle that leads to many members of the Pokalistan army dead, and the commandos scattered and on the run. Meanwhile, this episode's flashback shows what happened to Eric Frankenstein after he killed Victor Frankenstein and was horribly burned by the bride. An old, blind gypsy woman named Bogdana took him in and healed him, then taught him how to see beauty in the world without his eyes. And it seems like Frankenstein has learned some lessons, but of course, he hasn't. Rather than let Bogdana live without him, he kills her, then takes her dog. You can check out our breakdown of the Creature Commandos voice cast for Episode 1, Episode 2, Episode 3, and Episode 4. Read on for a breakdown of the Episode 5 voice cast. Creature Commandos Season 1, Episode 5 The Iron Pot cast, who's who in the cast? We won't recount who's who in the main cast here, as we've done that in previous breakdowns. However, I will mention that Alan Tudyk, who voices Dr. Phosphorus, voices Clayface. Which is neat because he also voices Clayface on the Harley Quinn animated series. It's pretty clearly an entirely different take on the character, but fun nonetheless. Stephanie Beatriz returns to voice McPherson, our Themyscira aficionado, and she seems to have a Valkyrie helmet Wonder Woman has been sporting in recent issues of her self-titled comic book. Interesting. What about our Mortal Kombat characters? Liu Kang is voiced by Matt Young King, and Scorpion by Daisuke Tsuji. They voiced those characters in Mortal Kombat 1, which makes that the game Clayface likely was playing. King was the voice of both Appa and Momo in Netflix's live-action Avatar, The Last Airbender, and also played Marty Mantle on several episodes of Riverdale. Tsuji was also Jin Sakai in Ghost of Tsushima, and as far as I'm aware, was never on Riverdale. Irina Maleeva plays the old woman, Bogdana, who is not only not someone from DC Comics, but also not the old woman who Frankenstein talked to back at the end of Episode 1. She recently played Natasha in Paul T. Goldman, and Marta on For All Mankind. And if the voice of Buxom Student sounded familiar? That was Carrie Walgren, a veteran voice actress with dozens of roles under her belt. Rounding out our Mortal Kombat crew, she was the voices of Kitana and Melina, and also portrayed Starfire in Injustice, aka the DC version of Mortal Kombat. Anime fans likely know her as Haruko Haruhara from FLCL, and she's done multiple voices on Rick and Morty including Jessica, among others.